Hello everyone, welcome back to Lucky Crit. After quite a long time with no news, we've finally received the September Nintendo Direct, and it's graced us with a brand new trailer of what's coming next for the Fire Emblem series. And much to many of our surprise, ladies and gentlemen, it turns out that Toothpaste-chan was real all along. You know, honestly, I kind of figured that there was a little too much effort put into that leak for it to be fake, but it's still pretty surprising that this is actually real. The trailer begins with a mural, very reminiscent of the one that we were shown in Fire Emblem Three Houses. This time though, we can see the two dragons, the white one, probably representing the Naga of this world, as well as the new cobra-headed Fell Dragon. They're both intertwined, giving a sense of the duality of light and dark. In the center, we're greeted to portraits of various heroes across the series. As we know from the leaks and later on in the trailer, these characters are called emblems, and, acting as a series homage, will heavily affect the gameplay of Fire Emblem Engage. By collecting their rings, the player can then utilize their individual powers during combat. They can even seem to fuse with your playable units. These characters are lords from across the Fire Emblem series. Starting at 12 o'clock, we have Marth, followed by Celica, then Sigurd, Leif, Roy, Lyn, Erica, Ike, Micaiah, Lucina, Corrin, and Byleth. 12 lords in total, each representing a distinct game in the Fire Emblem franchise. One thing to note here is that the chosen genders of these characters are likely to be the only ones we see in the game, solidifying Byleth as appearing male and Corrin as female for the purposes of this adventure. I want to take a minute here to point out just how shafted poor Eliwood was here. Fire Emblem 7 features a trio of lord characters, Lyn, Eliwood, and Hector. And while Lyn is the character that you start off with in the prologue, the actual main lord is more considered to be Eliwood. But I'm sure due to the success of Heroes and Lyn's rather powerful status as an all-time popular waifu, her assets easily edged him out. It's hard for guys in the Fire Emblem universe these days, you know? Another noteworthy detail is that in the case of both Lucina and Ike, they're both depicted here as wielding different weapons than they did canonically in their games. Sure, you could make Lucina wield a bow in Awakening, but she didn't have Thone until she appeared as legendary Lucina in Heroes. Ike also canonically wields his sword Ragnell, but is depicted here as his Brave Ike variant wielding his father Grail's Irvon axe. While these might initially seem like minor details, they signify a pretty significant change to the Fire Emblem franchise. For the first time ever, we're receiving a game directly influenced by the happenings of Fire Emblem Heroes, almost retroactively canonizing these alternate versions of the characters. I think the developers' goal here was to provide the player with a variety of different weapon types with these lord characters, hence the alterations we can see, and thus changing up the animations and gameplay a bit more by opting to swap two more of the swords for an axe and a bow. It's a really interesting little touch that I find pretty fascinating. We can see the lords again locked into combat at the bottom, presumably fighting against the Fell Dragon, and the common folk are above doing the same. Or dying, maybe. Unlike Fire Emblem Fates, we do also get to know the name of this new world, Elyos. We also learn that Elyos features 4 separate realms, with its Holy Land in the center, slightly reminiscent of Garrigmach Monastery in Three Houses. As per series tradition, and much like Marth's and Chrom's storylines that both took place in the world of Arcanea, once again we have a Fell Dragon who was sealed away thousands of years ago and is now beginning to reawaken. This new Fell Dragon looks rather elven in nature, with very pronounced ears, so I wonder if that will have some sort of purpose in the game or this character's story. We're then greeted by Toothpaste-chan himself, the male version this time. This is our protagonist. After having slept for 1,000 years, likely since the previous sealing of the Fell Dragon, Alear awakens. Next, we jump to a scene a little closer to town. We can now see one of the very Holland-like windmills in the background. Alear is engaging with a character behind a tree. She looks very reminiscent of characters like Veronica and Sothis from the series, so I wonder if she's the human form of the White Dragon that just appeared to Alear. My money would be on that. This scene of Alear fighting enemies known as the Corrupted is very reminiscent of Lucina's terrible future that she came from in Fire Emblem Awakening. Perhaps this is a flashback to what happened 1,000 years ago. This guy with the red hair is a little hard to make out. He reminds me a little bit of Sylvain, but he's likely to be a playable character or enemy, judging by his appearance here. He releases a fiery shockwave across the battlefield, and then we're greeted to this character, whose name we still do not know, but appears to be dressed like a dancer unit and wields some kind of lance or staff. We can then see Alfred, a Cavalier character that we'll discuss more later, and this waifu bait character, who I assume is the wyvern riding mage character Abby from the leaks. That name is probably not the final name, just FYI. Next, we get to see how emblems work, or perhaps their introduction in the game's story, considering that Marth gets summoned on a very similar looking field. This girl is named Fram. Frame? We'll get to see her fighting later. Behind her is another character whose name we also don't know yet. Perhaps it's her brother, as they look pretty similar. Both also may be a bit of an homage to Micaiah and Soth from Radiant Dawn, judging by their two rather similar color schemes. They seem to be the first normal people to find Alir after they've awoken. It sounds to me like Alir is voiced by Johnny Young Bosch, a pretty famous and well-known voice actor. He has a sort of Lelouch from Code Geass moment that happens here.
You're awake!
Huh?
You're really awake, yeah?
1,000 years? That's how long I've been asleep.
I could be wrong, but the voice actor sounds very familiar.
If I may, you are a divine dragon, a member of a royal family of dragons revered as deities.
The voiceover here indicates that Alir is a divine dragon, and member of a royal family of them regarded as deities. I wonder if this voice, an older adult male voice, is the voice of Vander, the older knight. It doesn't seem like it would fit to me, but I wonder who else would be saying this line.
The war. The Fell Dragon. I feel like I can almost remember.
It also appears that Alir has amnesia. Creative. We can see that the first chapter, or one of the early chapters at least, will feature Alir with the older knight Vander, Fram, and the other character in this small town framed by windmills. There's a house in the center here that reminds me of a very particular house in Path of Radiance. Let's hope that these noobs won't be greeted by a considerably powerful sinister character emerging from it. Alir's class is Dragon Child / Dragon. Is that a type? Perhaps for weakness purposes they're now spelling it out better for the player. Like Armor Knight / Armored, or as we'll see in a bit, Paladin / Cavalry. Dragon Child as an offspring of Naga, or this game's version of Naga, is right in line with series tropes. We can also see that among the familiar stats returning in this game, they've now specified whether or not the character will be attacking with physical or magical-based weapons. This might make it easier for some to understand whether or not they'll be attacking into the enemy's defense or resistance stats. As you may have expected, Charm from Three Houses is gone. Battalions were a gimmick for that game, and Three Hopes, and will not be returning here. You'll also notice that skills are back, potentially personal skills too. It looks like each character will have 3 slots for them. Alir wields a sword called Liberation. Liberation? It's kind of French sounding. This game absolutely takes inspiration from Europe for sure. There's a nice little combat forecast now featuring arrows as part of the UI to make it more understandable how combat will progress, especially when characters strike twice. Nice. These enemies are the Corrupted, perhaps influenced by the will of the Fell Dragon. They're pretty similar looking to the Risen from Fire Emblem Awakening. You can see that in this early mission, it looks like Fram and the boy need to be rescued by Alir and Vander. Once again, kinda reminiscent of Awakening, where Lissa gets attacked. Honestly, I'm beginning to feel like this game should be called Fire Emblem Reminisce. We then get to see Vander engage the enemy. He's pretty slow. It even shows his speed stat as red. Whether that's from a debuff or just highlighting that it sucks remains to be seen. We then see another character, Edie, who I presume was the character labeled as Lapis in the leak. She's an archer and wields an iron bow. She's attacking from a tower's battlements, which is definitely new, so perhaps this is how combat will look like from forts now. It seems the Corrupted can even be sword-wielding Peg Knights. Interesting. We then get to see Fram in action, and she appears to be some sort of brawler class. I love this, as aside from the Warmonk DLC class, brawling was not a great pick for a lot of female characters in Three Houses. I'd love to see some more variety with class types and availability. Fram wields Iron Body Art, which kinda looks like some sort of scroll, perhaps enhancing her martial arts abilities. We then see Lewis, presumably an Armor Knight, as he attacks an Elusian soldier, Peg Knight. Chloe looks to be our very own early game Peg Knight this time, as per tradition. She's fighting a thief with a hammer. This is noteworthy. Not only just because it's our first glimpse of obtainable items in the game since it's highlighted in green, but it also appears that thieves in this game may wield axes like they did in Gaiden and Echoes. I say this because Anna is returning as a playable character, which we know thanks to the leaks and this website image, and she herself looks to be a thief wielding an axe as well. Chloe is doing a critical attack here. It's unclear if this part of the trailer was clipped right after the character portrait cut-in, which is a series staple, and I'd say that's rather likely. Otherwise, we don't get to see it here or it doesn't happen anymore. This screen gives us a lot to digest. This is the Emblem Rings menu, where Alir is able to select the rings of the famous heroes to equip. By equipping Marth's, Alir gets access to Marth's rapier, likely granting effective damage against armored and cavalry enemies, like it always has. It also gives him the Perceptive, Break Defenses, Divine Speed, and Lodestar Rush abilities. These last two have a type bonus, which seems to be a curious new mechanic, maybe to provide even more buffs based on the character weapon type if it matches up with the ring they wear. Equipping Marth's ring also grants Alir enhancements to their physical attack, hit, avoid, crit, strength, dex, and speed. Alir's personal ability looks to be divinely inspiring, which personally reminds me a lot of Byleth's Professor's Guidance personal ability in Three Houses. Perhaps Alir's connection to the goddess will allow them to inspire their comrades. We can also see the pretty familiar build stat over to the left. Sometimes known as Constitution, this stat is a returning mechanic from many older Fire Emblem titles. It's used to signify a character's weight class or size. This is affected by their class type and whether or not they're mounted, and has in-battle effects in regards to older mechanics like rescue or capture, where bigger units were not able to be rescued properly by smaller units. It has also previously affected combat by helping to determine which weapons units could carry without suffering penalties to their attack speed. AKA, if you're a tiny unit wielding a big sword, you're not going to have a fun time. Seeing this return is really cool, so I hope mechanics like rescue and such are finally back in. It's been a while. Alir also already has a B rank in swords. Not bad. In the top right, we can see a bond effects menu, likely indicating that character bonds are returning, and there will be a nice handy tab to see their resulting effects on the battlefield. Characters also have a combat rating now, like other video games, indicating their overall combat potential. I bet your mom's is a 69. We then cut to another town battlefield scene, but this is likely to be another chapter, as now there are multiple other characters recruited. The player's force now includes Alir, Lewis the Armor Knight, Chloe the Peg Knight, Vander the Paladin, Fram the Brawler, or whatever she is. Wait a minute, is she literally a brawler but wields a staff? Okay, that's interesting. Alfred the Cavalier, and Celine the Mage. Celine we'll talk about later in the trailer. We can see that new indicators appear here when you equip the rings, and it shows their amount of energy or health remaining. We can see Alir's with Marth, and it looks like Alfred has equipped Celica's ring. They're fighting ruffians now, and Marth's perceptive ability is active or invoked as Alir attacks. We can see that Marth's break defenses ability also helps out here, as the enemy is overlaid with a break message, which could indicate a decrease to their defensive stats. Next we see the Cavalier Alfred, or Xander Light as I like to call him, and he's equipping Sigurd's ring. Alfred's personal ability is Self-Improver, maybe some kind of self-buff based on some certain circumstances. Maybe he's his own hype man. That's my bet. Sigurd provides the Rider's Bane weapon, granting effective damage against mounted enemies, as well as the Canter, Gallop, and Override abilities. Is Canter Canto? Or something similar? Okay. Sigurd grants a bonus to build, which is pretty cool. Maybe you can enhance smaller units with Sigurd's mounted abilities and get yourself out of a pinch in battle. It's noteworthy that this version of Alfred has a higher battle rating than Alir. Wrecked. There's a lot of playable characters on this particular screen, many of which we don't know yet, but some are likely to be others revealed in the leaked information. At this point they have Roy's ring and Mikaya's ring too. By equipping a character's ring, you also get access to their weapons, and in this case, it looks like Sigurd has something other than Rider's Bane too. Maybe Sigurd's lance? It looks more lance-like than Tyrfing to me. There are also now 3 more ability slots. These look like Sigurd's. We can see Cantor again, but the other 2 are not the same that we saw earlier. So maybe these change as you upgrade your bond level and continue to improve. At the bottom of the screen here, there's what looks to be a ballista, so those are returning. and we can also see various portals or teleport spots around the map. These have been present throughout the series, but what's notable here are the fact that they don't appear on the minimap. So maybe these aren't portals? I wonder if this is a new version of the Fallen Allies mechanic from Three Houses, where you could pick up free items and such where other players lost units. Or maybe it's the sparkly item spots from Awakening, where you could get free items and other effects. There are definitely quite a few here though, so that will remain to be seen. Sigurd's momentum ability triggers here, which sounds like maybe it could grant advantages for how far the player moved, or something along those lines. And now we finally get to see Base Camp, or the Monastery, whatever the central hub will be called in this game. Up top there's a UI element that says Somniel map, so maybe this place is called Somniel. Marth is here, indicating that as you collect rings in the game, you'll also be able to speak with and interact with these heroes at home base. I'm not expecting too much from this though. There's also some floating islands nearby, which is pretty interesting. Are we in a Sky Kingdom? Is this the center of the world map, the Holy Land they were talking about? We also get to see that fishing is returning due to the icon on the minimap, as well as a weapons shop, item shop, blacksmith, and a clothes shop. We'll get to that. Please let us pet the animals this time. The voiceover indicates that the home base has rather humble beginnings, so perhaps as your roster expands, it will continue to improve. I wonder if maybe there are even base upgrades over time as well. Now we get to see clothes in action. Here's another new character, Citrine. This is really awesome. The idea that we'll be able to further customize our favorite characters by giving them different outfits is a series first, and is super exciting. Please let this override any class that they're in, I am begging you. It appears that Citrine has also found the One Piece at long last.
The One Piece is real!
Who knew it was a bathing suit the whole time? The sunlit apron seems to imply there may be a flame tribe in this world too, as this is clothing worn by the people known as the Pyrenees. Get it? Because fire is in the name? Maybe that's one of the 4 realms. Will each realm have an element? I guess we'll find out. There's also a tab here for a mask accessory, which reminds me of the accessories from Fire Emblem Fates. So beyond clothes, there will also be headgear and other equipables. Pretty sweet. Alfred the Cavalier seems to be working around the home base. He's on that there butler grind. Know I'm saying? Beyond equipping rings, there will also be a further mechanic where characters can literally fuse with these previous Lord characters, as you can see here, by engaging their emblem. Alir fuses with Marth, giving him the very powerful legendary weapon Mercurius from Arcanea, and changing Alir's appearance drastically. Alfred fused with Sigurd radically changes his hair color and outfit as well. We then get to see what Sigurd's override ability does. The player literally rushes through the opponent, jumping to the other side of them. Finally, here's Celine and her little golden crown as she fuses with Celica and becomes a peach-haired version of herself. This gives her Celica's Ragnarok and also the Warp Ragnarok ability. She's able to teleport across the battlefield and attack, which is pretty powerful, honestly. In this dungeon map with the Ballista, we're fighting the Illusian army. It's unclear at this point if these special fusions can only happen to certain characters or characters with certain weapon types. I would say that would probably be pretty likely to be the case. I really can't see them designing and creating new models for every single character and ring combination. That sounds like a nightmare. What's noteworthy is that with the fusions that we've witnessed so far, each of these only occurred with a character wielding the same weapon type as the ring they equipped. Alir, who wields swords, fuses with Marth, Alfred, who wields lances, fuses with Sigurd, and Celine, who wields magic, fuses with Celica. I'd say it's either specific character based with each ring, or weapon type based. This would mean though that these characters are locked into these main weapon types, and the character class and weapon type openness of Three Houses is long gone, so keep that in mind. This could be a far more traditional Fire Emblem than we've received lately. This guy here looks like a bad guy, but I also wonder if he's the other red-haired character's dad. This girl is definitely a dragon, for sure. Evil man puts on ring, more at 5. Back to you, Tom. It seems the Divine Dragon wants Alir to gather all of the rings in order to bring peace back to the world. Maybe this is the only way to seal away the Fell Dragon. Either way, we're basically Captain Planet this time around. And honestly, could anything be better than that? This cutscene of Alir and company facing off against the Fell Dragon features the darker-skinned dancer girl, the redhead guy from earlier, Alfred, and the yet unnamed Abby girl who wields magic. And rides a wyvern, by the way. That's pretty sick. Then, with the help of Marth, Alir opens doors. All of the characters that we just mentioned facing off against the Fell Dragon in that cutscene are then present here in this main art. So perhaps these are some of the most story important characters. Maybe they're lords and ladies from each of the 4 major realms. I'm either really good at this or they're really predictable at this point. Maybe a little bit of both. Did you catch something I missed? Are you excited for Fire Emblem Engage? Let me know. In this video, I discussed the original leak in detail in case you wanted to know more about the now confirmed leak of info for this upcoming game. Throughout the years, we've experienced many ridiculous Fire Emblem leaks, a handful of which I've actually covered on this channel. Vampire Emblem, Pirate Emblem, the list goes on. And honestly, sometimes it can actually be fun to consider these leaks, or at least purely speculate or envision what we'd like to see in an upcoming Fire Emblem game.